Hi, beautiful ladies. Welcome back to my channel. A lot of you have been asking for me to talk about intimidation tactics that are used in a corporate setting. So today I'm going to be talking about that. Now, even though corporate settings are known to be professional and workers are held to a high standard of decorum and ethic and in terms of how they interact with their colleagues, having strict boundaries and guidelines for how coworkers interact with each other in order to avoid workplace harassment and drama and things like that. I have found corporate settings to be one of the most comical environments because corporate settings tend to be, and just workplaces in general, they tend to be some of the most contentious, drama filled breeding grounds because you're dealing with human beings from all walks of life and different maturity levels who show up to work with their baggage and their unhealed trauma. And so they project it onto their coworkers because, for the most part, if you're working a full-time job, you spend more time with your coworkers than you do your friends and even your family members. Maybe not so much now because a lot of people still work from home or at the very least have a hybrid working model. But even then, having interactions virtually with people via Teams or Skype, drama can still go about. It's important to know that you have to be very careful when you're dealing with people because, again, there are pretty much a lot of legal parameters that are put in place to protect the company. First and foremost, HR works for the company. And so if an employee does anything, if their conduct breaches any of these parameters and creates a hostile working environment for their colleagues, which would end up making the company look bad and could put the company at risk for a lawsuit. Some companies and workplaces, they have a no tolerance policy, even for things as simple as group chat, as I spoke about in my previous intimidation video. Something as simple as a group chat can get you fired if you're not careful, or even if you're a member in the group and you knew about it but you didn't say anything, you could be terminated because you're a bystander who pretty much didn't do their part to protect the company. So I remember when I was first starting out, I worked for a department that supported the contact center. And there was this one guy, I think he was on the spectrum. And so, because of that, he had a difficult time kind of relating to people because he just perceived the world differently. And so there was a group of loser employees that kind of bullied him. One of the ways that they would do this was via Skype. And they would poke fun at him in person, to his face. This was before the pandemic when you had to go into the office 5 days a week. They would kind of make passive aggressive passes at him to make him feel uncomfortable. Sometimes this one guy would adjust the guy's monitor and it would obviously upset him. It would upset anybody, but they knew that this guy would react outwardly because of his neurodiversion, and so they used that to harass him. And so long story short, they were talking about him in an unkind manner via Skype, and then they deleted the chat. But somehow it got to one of the managers, and the managers called them all into the office, and they were like, I heard that you were talking about, let's call him Bob. I heard that you were talking about Bob and saying all these things. Is that true? And the guy was like, oh no, I would never say anything about Bob. And they're like, oh really? And they pulled out pages of the printed Skype conversation. They're like, okay, so then what's this? And the guy was flabbergasted that they had those records because he thought that once you delete that conversation, that it's done. Which is foolish because any device that you use that is issued by your employer, even if you have the freedom to customize it, whether it's a laptop or a cell phone, anything that can store information, that is the property of your employer. And so therefore, IT has the right to monitor your activity, and they do that. Okay, they want to make sure that people are staying on task, and they also want to make sure that people are not violating their work policy in any way, whether it's harassing their coworkers, sending sensitive documents to their personal email, watching inappropriate things on the work laptop, like things like that. And so I'm saying all this to say the same way that they could retrieve those documents to ultimately fire this guy, he ended up getting fired, is the same way how you should document everything. Okay, document, document, document. I spoke about in another video where one of the viewers had mentioned that she was kind of being harassed for her hairstyle, but this honestly can relate to anything. Anytime someone says anything untoward, take screenshots of the conversation. If you feel like the person was being shady, being passive aggressive, or making microaggressions, or just being flat out rude, and you're trying to build a case, like take screenshots. Sometimes it may even have to be, if there's no screenshot evident, like maybe you're in a Teams call and they say something inappropriate towards you, or they try to blame you for something that's not your responsibility, that could be seen as harassment. Take a log of it, make notes, open up OneNote on your laptop or any other note system, write down the date and the time, type out the situation that happened, the witnesses that were there, and the outcome. Because if and when this comes up and you want to talk to the person's manager about it so that the person can get coaching, or you want to go to HR, you need to have evidence and a track record. And one thing that will help your case is when they see that you have receipts, they're more likely to take you seriously because it shows, number one, that you're doing your due diligence. And number two, you having receipts is something that you can send to a lawyer. So a lot of times, whenever you have examples to back up what you're saying and you're not just speaking from a place of emotions, managers are more likely to work in your favor and to shut it down quickly because they don't want any problems. And also, they just don't have the time to be dealing with all these extracurricular issues. I really wish that people would just show up to work and do their job and leave all that extra stuff in their personal life. But unfortunately, as I said before, people come from different walks of life and they have their own baggage. And so, unfortunately, not everyone knows how to behave themselves in a professional manner. Sometimes you'll also experience jealousy. It is very, very common to, when you're in close proximity with anyone, it's very easy for someone to get jealous when maybe they're not doing as well in life and they see someone else progressing, and the workplace is no different. I remember when I was in a previous role where I had to report to a senior. So I was in a, I guess you call it like associate level. So there was my level associate, then there was a supervisor, then there was the manager. So the manager that I was really, really close with, she ended up leaving for another position. And so a new manager came in. The manager, she was on mat leave, and then she came back to her supervisor role. But then because that other manager left, they thought that her and the supervisor that I reported to would be a natural fit for both of them to kind of backfill temporarily while they hired full time for someone else, because, you know, they were the next step to manager. So I hadn't worked with that person because when I joined the team, that person was on mat leave and then she came back and whatever. So I had to report to this other person. And I remember when it was time for my annual review. Annual review always happens, and your mid-year review, it always happens with the manager, not the supervisor. The supervisor will report to the manager about your progress. So because the manager was new and she didn't know me, the supervisor that I reported to and her, we had my annual review. And so she's like, oh, you know, Black Exotical, you rated yourself with 2 stars, which is achieved, but I don't really see you operating at that level because, you know, you're just not at that level. And she could not really give me any concrete examples as to what she meant. And neither could my supervisor. She just kept repeating herself, and they both just kept, when she asked my supervisor to chime in and provide examples because she's the one who I worked with, my supervisor just kept saying, oh, you just need to do more so that you can reach the level of myself and another supervisor who was on the team. And I had also put on my review that I was looking for a role. And so I marked myself a certain rating because I had pretty much done everything that I needed to do to get that role. They're pretty much like, oh no, you're not going to get a new role because, again, you're not on our level. And if you want to be on our level, you need to do more. Just very, very vague answers. And I was livid when they said that because I was doing the same work as the supervisors. I was doing all of their work except for like one task that they couldn't train me on. Because I wasn't a supervisor, I didn't have that access, but I pretty much did everything that they did. Every time that there was an escalation from other departments, they would come to me and I would always resolve it. Like, no one ever complained about my work, and my work was meticulous. And there was another supervisor that was dumb as doornail. Like, she did not know her job, even though we all started at the same time. She didn't know how to do her job, and just basic things that like an intern would know. She was constantly asking me, like, oh, do I have to do this? Or can you please remind me of X, Y, and Z? And I would get so annoyed and tell her, like, yo, like, take notes. This is so simple. Like, take notes so that you don't forget because you're always asking me this. And yet, still, the supervisor that I reported to had the audacity to tell me that I wasn't on their level. And this woman even ended up costing the company a couple hundred thousands of dollars because of a mistake that she continually made and that they obviously didn't address. So I was like frustrated and I was upset. And I was upset at the manager because she's pretty much echoing the sentiments of the supervisor without even knowing me. But then as time progressed, another senior manager that I worked with in that department, she moved on. She's like, hey, we're going to be hiring for a position and I want you on my team. So get your resume ready so that when the position is posted, you can come over. And the manager changed her tune completely. She's like, you have what it takes. I can see you being a manager in this company and beyond. And she began to list out all the people who started off where I was and ended up being a manager and saying, look to these people as motivation. If they can do it, so can you. And she's cheering me on. Like, she didn't say it in a way where it was like, I've observed you and I've seen a lot of growth and change in you. Like, you've really improved. She didn't say that. She just said, oh, I can see you are going to be great. Like, you already have the skill set to be great and to do these things, as if that was her mentality all along. And it dawned on me that she was only going off what the supervisor had told her because she did not know me. And of course, it would be natural that the supervisor would give a report on my progress and on my performance. But as time progressed and she got to know me and she saw my work ethic and she saw what I could do, she saw for herself that what the supervisor was saying was not true. And it was at that moment where I'm like, you know what? I'm going to plug in and I'm going to do, number one, I want to leave this role anyway. Like, it's time for me to move on. But now I really just don't want to work with this individual because she was trying to sabotage my career and hold me back. So that was enough ammunition for me to really work hard to achieve my goals. I ended up getting that position, which made me be on her level. We ended up being supervisors at the same level. And then, like a year later, I ended up getting a management position and outranking her. The moral of this story is do not give up in your endeavors and do not take what people say as confirmation of who you are. Do not let people tell you who you are. If you know that you have what it takes to do great things, keep pushing ahead, even though you will face setbacks. We will all face setbacks in life, but the difference between people who make it in life and people who stay at the bottom is that people who make it in life, they always have a game plan on how to get out, even if that game plan has to change and there are multiple detours because life is not perfect and it doesn't always happen the way that we want to. And they don't adopt this victim mentality where they sit around and sulk and hope that people will have pity on them. Honestly, if you work in a job that's very demanding and you're not really getting praised by people, which you shouldn't look for people's approval, but if you're not really getting any recognition or marker to show that you're being successful, it can cause you to really doubt yourself. And I've seen so many people be in the same role or department, not moving up for like 10 years, 20 years because they thought that it was too hard and they simply did not have what it took to get to the next level in terms of their skill set and strategy. Okay, you always need to have a strategy. And for me in this situation, it was my perseverance, it was my networking. Okay, I pretty much got the job because of the network that I had and the person who reached out to me. But if I did not have the skill set to get the role, she would have never reached out to me. All those things, having a strategy and a game plan to get you from role to role, is what will help you get ahead. That situation also reinforced the importance of remaining private. After that review with the new manager and my supervisor, I reached out to my manager and I was like, look, I really appreciate this person's feedback because, I report to them each day. But I would like to ask that moving forward, when we have annual reviews and mid-year reviews, that I only have it with you one-on-one, and this individual can provide feedback to you in advance, because I'd like to keep it confidential between you and I. And, this was the practice with the previous manager. And she's like, oh yeah, absolutely, no problem. It's almost as if she understood. And so that created a more intimate and less hostile environment, even though the person, she wasn't aggressive in the meeting and she was pretty silent and wouldn't defend me. And she pretty much reinforced the, oh, you're not ish belief. It was hostile in that her intention was pretty evident that she was trying to hold me back. And she was trying to hold me back because she herself is one of those individuals that never progressed outside of the company. She joined the company like back in the early 2000s and pretty much stayed there up until like 2022, 2023. And she had expressed like, oh, I don't really have confidence in applying for roles. Like she was just trauma dumping and saying how she's not confident to apply and she always second guessed herself. I don't know if she was looking for me to be like, oh, don't worry, like you're great, you'll do great. I was like, oh, okay. Anyway, back to work type of thing. Like that's another thing. It may sound mean, but do not affirm people who have done you wrong. Okay? It's better to just keep quiet, and whenever they are like that, or even if they haven't done you wrong, but they like to trauma dump all the time, I don't dig into it because they're looking to feed off of your energy to help to give them that shot of reassurance and dopamine. It's not going to come from me. You're not going to siphon my energy simply because you do not want to do the work to get to where you need to be. Me keeping private in my plans, like I remember them talking about, oh, like, what do you want to do? And like, what's your game plan? And I was going to go in detail during that session and tell them like what I wanted to do because that's what you're supposed to talk about with your manager. But it's almost like as if God just shut my mouth. And I was like, all I could say was, I don't know. I don't know what I want to do. And then they're both like, okay, well, you should probably think about that first and then get the skills. But I knew exactly what I wanted to do and I knew what I had to get there. And when I look back, I knew that it was the right decision to not tell them my game plan because I did not want that supervisor, that jealous supervisor, to know what my game plan was to try to deter me off of my track. And it ended up working out. It's also important to get a mentor. A mentor can honestly do a number of things for you. They can give you access to tools and resources to help you get the skills that you need to bolster your career or to prepare you for the next role. They can connect you with individuals who can get you to the next role. So when I was applying for that job to leave that department, I got with the manager who left. She had said, hey, if anybody wants a mentor, let me know. I'm happy to help. And I took her up on her offer. And she worked with me for a couple months to get the skill set that I needed, to get the interview prep, to review my resume. And that paired with my relationship with the manager, the hiring manager, got me that role. It's very important for you to have positive relationships with people at work because managers tend to hire based on relationships and who they know. When there's a posting coming up for themselves or their work colleagues, and they're looking to fill that role, they always try to see who they know that can fill it first because it is so much easier to hire someone that you know their work ethic, even if you're not close with that person. If you know their work ethic, you know what to expect, and it'll make the onboarding process a lot easier as opposed to just blindly hiring someone internally or externally and hoping for the best. A lot of times your mentor can also vouch for you, and because you may have another person who's senior to you, whether it's a manager, senior manager, director, vouching for you to a hiring manager, you're more than likely to get the role over someone else who's just going in blindly, because it's like, you know what? I respect this person's work ethic. I'm going to take their advice and hire the person that they're recommending, because I know then it's going to be a smooth transition for me, and I don't have to have a nightmare hiring story of me hiring someone who looked amazing on paper, did rock the interview, and then it's like Jekyll and Hyde, they're a different person when they start working. And lastly, just as something that's a bit off topic, it is so important for you to maintain boundaries so that you're not burnt out, number one. And number two, so that corporate knows that they cannot use you. Because if you're the type of person who has no sense of work-life balance, for example, you're willing to answer your phone before business hours, after business hours, on your personal device, and when you're not getting paid, there are some managers who will use that to their advantage and exploit that. I had a manager do that, and I had to talk to her manager and be like, look, I don't appreciate this person calling me an hour after I've finished my shift to talk about something that we could talk about in the office tomorrow. And especially because I found out that this individual would often walk away from her laptop and watch TV for hours and then come back and work after, and then expect me to do the same just because she didn't want to work during business hours. So having those boundaries so that people know not to try you, because if just because you are willing to go above and beyond like this, so to speak, doesn't mean that corporations will reward you for it. As a matter of fact, corporations tend to just use people like that for their own benefit so they can, I guess, get the job done. But they reward people who have boundaries because you look like someone who values themselves. And true leaders, number one, understand boundaries. And number two, they value themselves. And so they're going to make the company look good. Like, these are valuable, strong people with strong skill set that we have on our team. We're proud to put this person forward to represent us. Think of it this way. Strive to be the show pony rather than being the workhorse. Okay? The show pony is pretty much the prized possession, very, very skilled at their craft. They look good. Everyone knows who they are. You know, they get recognition and accolades and awards for their owner, or in this case, your boss, your manager. But the show pony gets the best of the best, okay? The show pony gets the best food so that it can remain strong and have a nice shiny coat and mane. The show pony is not overworked because its owner doesn't want it to get injured and be exhausted and have health issues. The show pony is kind of given the best water and treatment from the vet. Like, you get the cream of the crop. Whereas the workhorse is in the field plowing them fields from sun up to sundown. Okay? And the workhorse is obviously strong and good at its role in order for it to be able to plow those fields or carry produce for its owner, but it's not really recognized. It's kind of just given whatever food to kind of keep it alive and keep it going, but it may look a bit rough. It probably is definitely not getting more than a bath to keep it clean. If it's sick, then yeah, the vet will come and take a look so that they can continue to work and make the owner money, but it doesn't receive the prized possession treatment that the show pony gets. Okay? Be the show pony and do not be the workhorse. Okay? Working and plowing them fields, hoping that it's going to get you to the next level. It's not going to get you to the next level. It's just going to get you used. Having boundaries, not doing what's more than what's required of you, especially if you're not getting paid for it. Not working crazy hours, especially if no one else works those crazy hours. Why should you? This is not even a Gen Z type of mentality. This is honestly just a common sense, value yourself mentality. Show them that you are the show pony and that you expect to receive benefits. And if they're not willing to give you benefits for your skill set, someone else will. Someone else from another department, and especially someone else from another company, especially if it's a competitor. And if you're in a high position like manager and up in corporate settings, whether it's in banking, if it's in law, if it's in finance in general, they will come and give you a better package because you're with a top competitor. Do only what's required of you in your job description to the best of your ability, but don't take on more. Like, oh, sorry, I have X amount of tasks that I'm working on with X amount of deadline. I don't have any capacity right now to take on more. That's it. Let them figure it out. And I'll just leave you with this. I had a manager who was a prime example of a workhorse. And she was of course a Black woman, because Black women seem to love being workhorses. She was recognized in the company for being the go-to person to fix everyone's problems. She was the most knowledgeable, but yet they didn't even give her a senior title, even though she was more senior than the rest of the staff. So everyone else on the team, we all pretty much had the same title, which to me is a big deal. If I'm senior than you and I'm doing more senior tasks, I deserve to be addressed accordingly, because that recognition and that respect in corporations goes a long way. She didn't get that. She had worked overtime and, done a lot of great things to help the company onboard a new vendor. And they had like a trip to, I think it was to Vegas or New York, where they're like choosing, I think, a couple individuals to go. She wasn't chosen, even though she was the best fit. Every year, they have an annual awards ceremony where your colleagues will nominate someone who they think is the best worker to get an award. This individual received the most nominations, and yet management said, no, we're not going to give it to her. And she deserved it. It's not like she was lazy or she didn't know her stuff. Like, these managers would always go to her to fix their problems, especially when it came to disciplining staff who wasn't doing well. And yet they couldn't even give her that little award that pretty much would cost them nothing to give it to her. Okay? And she would always talk about how she's feeling exhausted and tired and burnt out. And it's like, no kidding. Like, the first time that they showed you that they weren't even willing to acknowledge your efforts would have been the first time that I would have pulled back and had boundaries and said, hey, I don't feel comfortable dealing with this because, it's not within my skill set. Or I would have just looked for another position elsewhere. But she's of the generation where they think that if you speak up, management will hold that against you. Sometimes they will and sometimes they won't. They're honestly more likely to not try you when you're speaking from a place of facts. And she's also from the generation where they think if you show up early and stay late and you run yourself into the ground, it shows that you take your job seriously. And obviously that hasn't worked out for her. So do not be a workhorse, be a show pony, get what you deserve out of work. And if you're not getting anything out of that working relationship, move on. Because again, one thing about these corporations is they will use you, and when they're ready to get rid of you, whether through layoffs or getting fired, they will do it swiftly without feeling bad. So get what you deserve, even if that's letting them pay for a course, getting them to pay for a course so that you can level up in your career. Do that. A lot of corporations have a tuition assistance program, literally pay for you to get your bachelor's degree. I've heard of people getting your master's degree or just certifications or licensing fees. And so that you don't have to pay for these things out of pocket. Get every single benefit that is available to you on the company dime. So God forbid they kick you out. Oh, well, they can't take away my certification though. And I'll use that and go apply for a job elsewhere in the industry. And I'll have a better chance of getting the role because I'm certified. All right. Thank you so much for listening to this. Let me know what you think about the video down below in the comments, and I will see you in the next video.